Welcome to Taking the Edge Off the Middle East, a series of casual conversations that offer up rare insider knowledge on the most important events in the broader Middle East and why it all matters to America today. I'm Brian Katulis. I'm a senior fellow here at the Middle East Institute, and I'm host of the podcast. And today we have a special bonus episode. Today I'm joined by Dr. Majed Al-Ansari, advisor to the Prime Minister of Qatar, and he's also spokesman of the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Majed, welcome to the Middle East Institute, and let's take some edge off the Middle East.
Thank you very much for having me, Brian.
Thanks. Let's start out with some basics, because some of our listeners maybe have never been to Qatar. They're certainly interested in the Middle East if they're listening to this podcast. Just really, really basic, because we're here in America, or America as we say sometimes, and I've heard your country pronounced in so many different ways. I've heard gutter, as if like a rain gutter on a house, or even guitar. I was in Nashville earlier this week. I speak Arabic. I would say Qatar. How do you say it? Let's just set the record straight.
So there are two right pronunciations.
Okay.
One that's in proper Arabic,
Yes.
which is Qatar.
Qatar.
One that's very Qatari and Gulfi, which is Qatar.
Guitar.
Guitar.
This is okay. You solved a mystery for me, because this is how someone who serves maybe in the military over there or knows your country, and they'll say either guitar or gutter. We've heard different things.
So if we go to the more patriotic Qataris, they would say, if somebody that doesn't call it Qatar, it's probably not Qatari.
Okay. Yeah.
So officially we say, it's Qatar. Even my says never say, Qatar, because I'm speaking proper Arabic. But in our, if I'm speaking to my Qatari friends and Gulfi friends, I would say Qatar.
What's the origin of the name?
So there are a lot of theories,
Yeah.
which I would say none of them have, good historic, strength.
Yeah.
The name is very old. So in Greek maps you'd find Qatar, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the name itself in Arabic is derived from Qatar, which means drops, basically.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
the drip process. And because it's a peninsula,
Yeah.
with water dripping around it, in all of these lagoons and incursions of water into the country, because we don't have any rivers, we don't have any lakes.
Yeah.
But you can the coast is not a straight line. It's a very curved line where you can see water coming in and out.
Yeah.
So that's one way of explaining it.
Yeah, there's many different ways, and I have to say I've been to your country many, many times. And when you mention maps, Greek maps, I know going to your national library, and I really recommend it, because it's not just books, but you have artifacts and maps from way back when, and it shows you sort of the history, the heritage. It's a very sort of rich country, more ways than one, right? And rich in heritage and things like this. Tell us a little bit about it. What was it like growing up there, and what's it like today?
Well, Qatar is a very small country. It's
How many people live there?
so the whole population is around 3 million, so less than 3 million.
Uh-huh.
The Qatar is around 10%, so we're around like 340,000.
Wow.
You have 340,000 Qataris in existence making all of this fuss around the world. It's heavily dependent on natural gas.
Right.
Historically, it was founded as a result of regional competition between different players, and the Qatari tribes kind of united around Doha, the city of Doha, now the city of Doha, then Al-Bida,
Yeah.
the neighborhood, basically, where all of them resided, in order to establish an entity that would play a balancing act around all of these players in the region. And if you came to Qatar in the 80s, you probably find a really long road called the Corniche that ends with the Sheraton Hotel that was built to for a specific summit. I think it was the
Arab League Summit.
The Arab League Summit, yeah. At the time, first time being held in Doha, and not much more than that.
Right.
I remember growing up in Doha. I was born in the 80s, and there's very little to do. Right? I mean, it was a very small city-state. Population was around 800,000. You can imagine, But now we are at a point where Qatar is a metropolitan. The city of Doha, which, now Greater Doha, encompasses the majority of people who live in Qatar, with other small cities, basically around Doha.
Yeah.
The longest car ride you can have in Doha is 2 hours between the border to the south and the tip at the north looking to the Gulf.
Yeah.
So it's a very small geographically. It's small when it comes to population, but it's very diverse. We have more than 180 nationalities living in Qatar.
Right.
You'd be able to go through neighborhoods where the majority of people there are from the the South Asian backgrounds. You'd go into neighborhoods where there are Arabs and Arab expats who've been living there for decades and generations. You'd go into neighborhoods where it's a mix of Qataris and expats living together. It's a very diverse situation. Even universities, we were talking about universities before we started.
Yeah.
You can find universities like Northwestern, Cornell, Weill Cornell, Carnegie Mellon,
Georgetown
with a campus in Doha.
Yeah.
You'll also find UK universities over there like Northumbria, Liverpool, and others, and you'd find also the local universities. So it's a very diverse background when it comes to how people interact.
Right.
And one of the things I think people don't understand about Qatar is how everybody's able to live not in isolation, but within their own identities.
So live and let live in their own identity. There's respect for that.
You go to a shopping mall, because of the heat in Doha, shopping malls are very popular.
Right.
You go to a shopping mall and just have a stroll and see people wearing different clothes, talking different dialects, walking next to each other. You see friends at cafes that are for 6-7 different nationalities.
Right.
I mean, this is why I think we have a better understanding of the world. It's because the world is living in Qatar.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we witnessed that in 2022. People forget this, but with the World Cup, and your country really has become, and I think the region and the Gulf region itself has become this crossroads, this international crossroads where East meets West, and it intermingles, and it's actually quite interesting and fun to go there. You got world-class restaurants and things like that. So that's the basics, the background basics on Qatar. Let's get into the tougher questions and the stuff that you deal with day to day. First, the foreign policy approach, the diplomatic approach globally, before we get into the Middle East. How would you describe it? What it is that you're doing today? Because you're a small country, you have a tremendous wealth from oil and gas, and you play a big role in global gas markets as I see it. But you also play a diplomatic role around the world, not just in the Middle East. Describe that a little bit for us.
Well, there is a uniqueness we pride ourselves in Qatar. And, the inception of the state was because there was a regional dispute in the region, and we took the position of being balancer by working with the Ottomans, the British, the Bahrainis, the Saudis, the empires of the times, the Iranians.
Yeah.
We're smack in the middle of all of that. We're a very small, basically city-state.
So you're like Venice was way back when.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With less rivers and streams and, nice architecture.
Yeah.
That developed very quickly into this, power of negotiation. You go back to I remember reading this communique that a British officer sent back complaining about how tough Qatari negotiators were when they were trying to sign the deal with Qatar for protection, because, he had the Qataris on the other side negotiating every term. And this was back in the 1800s when basically there were no institutions in Qatar, but the tradition of the country was of being a tough negotiator, was of being able to balance different powers and work within different contexts and understand these contexts and know how to maneuver them. And this is why we got a deal with the British that's different than any of our neighbors. We got the deal that the British would confirm that they would help secure Qatar against land invasion. And all the other agreements in the region, it's always against sea invasions.
Oh, okay.
Because the British were not concerned with it.
Is that deal still in place?
No, sadly, it expired in 1968.
Okay.
But of course, it's it became part of the raison d'etre of the state.
Right. Yeah.
Being the negotiator, the mediator. Right. In 1962, for example, even before the inception of the state, the Evian Accords between the Algerians and the French were signed in the residence of the Qatari ruler in Geneva.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Yes. I mean, it's these small things that people don't realize. We started our mediation between regional players in the 90s. Worked between the Houthis and the government at the time, because of a wholly different context.
Yeah.
We worked with the Lebanese factions in 2006 to establish the post-war situation over there and to fill the presidential void. Darfur, between the Darfur separatists and the government, Eritrea and Djibouti, and then just went on and on and on and on until we got to this point where we are mediating between, Colombian government and one of the rebel groups over there, Venezuela, and the United States.
Africa, you were involved with.
Of course, with DRC and Rwanda, and the Sahel and Somalia right now. In Asia, we have also a couple of initiatives that will be announced very soon.
Yeah.
We have 12 mediations actually going at the same time right now, all headed by the same very capable chief negotiator, our Minister of State, Dr. Al-Khulaifi, who's the previous Dean of Law at the University.
He's a busy man, and he has a piece in the Washington Post today. We're recording this on a Friday, September 19th, and an interesting perspective. We'll get into those Middle East issues. How do you juggle all of this as a small country?
I think we're used to it, because we're only 340,000 people. Everybody does like 10 jobs, and I mean, you could say that, there's a very prosperous country. Everybody's fairly off, economically, but Qataris are quite resilient when it comes to doing the work needed.
Yeah.
We are able to do things that I think a lot of our counterparts question how we are able to do it because of that resilience, that agility, flexibility, the understanding of the world, and the history of the country.
Yeah.
In our short history, we've done so much with so little that we believe in it. I'll give you an example of that. The decision to shift from oil to natural gas. In Qatar, what we used to do with natural gas, we used to burn it to get to the oil.
Oh, wow.
If you can imagine.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You burn it because you need to go to the oil, and it's like the first thing in the oil field is going to be the gas thing, so you only get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Right? The decision for a country that's basically almost landlocked, with only one border with Saudi Arabia, and with the biggest field shared with Iran, in a region that is, to say the least, not that stable, to go from oil to natural gas that at the time can only be transferred around the world through pipes, was the craziest decision ever.
Yeah.
Right? That decision was taken, and through the ingenuity of our engineers working with ExxonMobil and others, we were the first to transform natural gas into being liquefied natural gas.
Right.
And this is why now we are able to send our liquefied natural gas everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And it's the new model around natural gas. And it changed the face of energy production around the world.
Yeah.
But think of the decision, right? At the time, everybody was telling Qatar, you're crazy.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, His Highness at the time was taking that decision. He invested heavily in it. The country was broke at that time, literally broke because of that investment, right? But now, because of the audacity and the brave nature of our leaders, it happened.
Right.
And it's now, why we, when it comes to GDP, we're number one around the world, and we are able to play that part. But we always realize that our prosperity, our security has dividends.
Yeah.
You can't be a passive player in the international community and say, I'll just enjoy this wealth and hope that everybody else just protects the regional and international peace and security, and we basically just pay into aid and development or whatever it is.
Right.
No, you need to take an active role in protecting your prosperity through creating peace and creating peaceful opportunities around the world. And this is why we invest very heavily in peace, even, if at the end we end up being with targets on our backs because we're
going to talk about those targets and how you're a punching bag and things like that, especially in the Middle East in a little bit. But this decision on natural gas, it's interesting. I think it's not only it reshaped global energy markets, and we have great energy experts here, Karen Young, Colby Conley here at MEI, but it also, I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, and there was a big question about energy security in Europe, and Qatar was one of the first ones to step in, right? And though these things take some time, if I recall at the time in 2022, you stepped up and said, we want to use our unique role to try to stabilize energy markets. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, we were talking to the Europeans for years and years and years about the need for them to diversify.
Yeah.
And we were giving them opportunities to diversify. At the time, the Europeans, we have the Green Deal. Now we're phasing out all hydrocarbons. We don't really need it. We have natural gas coming in from Russia.
Yeah.
And this is why when we were doing our expansion, which is the biggest expansion in any natural gas field around the world, into like 126 and now more than 170 million tons, we wanted to diversify into Europe. But the Europeans were not concerned with the idea. The problem with liquefied natural gas is that you need a long-term model in order for these contracts to succeed. So you can't say, it's not like oil. You put it in barrels, you put it at sea, and whoever, just...
You need commitments over time.
You need commitments over time because you're building, reception stations, you're building it into the grid. It has to be directly into the grid because liquefied natural gas is, again, you can't put it in a barrel and just throw it off the ship.
Yeah.
And this is why most of our clients are in Asia. They're not in Europe. So China, South Korea, are two of our biggest customers. And now India, of course, is one of our biggest customers. We're helping India move from coal to natural gas and reduce their emissions over there through doing that. And we've always believed in natural gas as a way as a transitional fuel that will help us get away from the emissions that are happening right now. And coal, of course, is the worst kind. Post the war in 2022, what happened? Europe started burning coal like crazy. Right? So we went back to Europe and said, well, it's still very difficult to get across EU regulation. But we're working very closely with the Europeans, especially with countries like Poland, Italy, the United Kingdom, which is not in the EU, but in Europe as a whole. We're working very closely with Germany right now, and we've diversified our clientele in Europe in a very healthy way. And we believe that's the way forward. And I'll just tell you one thing. Everybody assumes that because we're an energy-producing country, then we are basically against any environmental policy and for any anti-environmental policy, right? Well, let me tell you what we did with the shipping of the LNG. So you have to have these big tankers that basically keep the natural gas liquefied, which is not a process that just happens naturally, right? You don't move it into a liquid and just becomes a liquid. You have to keep it a liquid. And in order to make zero emissions or get close to zero emissions for the shipment of that natural gas, we've manufactured these tankers that basically use the gas inside it for the energy to get it from point A to point B. So the tankers are working using the gas inside without utilizing it in the end product kind of.
Right, and then not adding to the problem of climate change and things like that.
And getting countries to stop their dependency on coal and moving to natural gas is very important because it's considerably less emissions. And it's more, work for your money, and it's a better deal for the environment and for the grid and the stability of the grid. And it doesn't need a lot of infrastructure to make that change unless you are willing to do it in a strategic sense. So it's happening around the world, and we're helping with it and we're very much invested right now in changing our energy portfolio and to becoming an investor in energy. So we're doing drilling, we're doing exploration, especially in Global South, where we're helping those economies, move into being energy economies, and it's been very successful for us.
Well, thanks for taking us on this global tour. I think it was important to set the table for some of the tougher questions everybody has about your country in the Middle East, because it sets a framework to helps explain sort of what's changed even in your lifetime since the 1980s inside of Qatar, and then how you see sort of the role there. So let's scope in on US-Qatar relations, and it's been a heck of a 4 or 5 months, wouldn't you say? Here we are in September. So you hosted President Donald Trump on his first trip overseas that I think was planned. I think he went overseas to Italy for Pope Francis's funeral before that, and he was there in May. And then a month later, there's this war between Israel and Iran, a 12-day war, and you get targeted by that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then more recently, earlier this month on September 9th, you're hit by Israel, one of another U.S. partner in the Middle East. So it's quite a trajectory. When I look back on President Trump's visit, and I've thought of something he said when he was there visiting in May in front of jets and drones, and he said, "I will never hesitate to wield American power if it's necessary to defend the United States of America or our partners." And he also said this, "And this is one of our great partners right now, Qatar." This is what he said. A month before this war between Israel and Iran, you get hit twice. How does it feel? Like, it must be dizzying to be through this process. And you're also mediating on multiple fronts, also including the mediation to the end of that war between Israel and Iran. How does it feel today in September? And where are U.S.-Qatar relations bilaterally?
Well, listen, the relationship with this administration and the U.S. as a whole has always been not only institutional, but also very personal. You look at the relationship between His Highness and President Trump. They meet regularly. They have discussions over these issues, and the initiatives we're working on right now cannot be limited to our region. As I said, we're working on Colombia with the United States. We're working on Venezuela. We're working on Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia. In all of these, and DRC, Rwanda, of course, and all the other stuff we're working on, even going up to other places in Europe and Asia that are still in the works, but we're working again with the United States. So in the grand picture, I think this partnership has produced a lot for the world that Qatar's utility in being a peacemaker around the world has been proven through the partnership with the United States. And it's very important to have the United States on board as a partner or party to these mediations, because basically you always need a guarantor for the parties to commit to peace.
Right.
And what better guarantor can you get other than the United States?
Uh-huh.
Now, our region has been always problematic. The terrible attacks of the 7th of October, of course, were a destabilizing factor in the region.
Uh-huh.
But then the region became hostage to two people, Yahya Sinwar and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Uh-huh.
Well, one of these people is dead.
Yeah.
The other is still, raining chaos on the region. At the same weekend, Prime Minister Netanyahu decided unilaterally, by the way, not even consulting with the United States or his own intelligence agency, when he decided to bomb Qatar, the other 7 cities also bombed in the region.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
6 sovereign states were attacked by Israel. This is a very dangerous precedent in the region because it moves threat perception
Uh-huh.
in the region from your usual suspects to Israel.
The usual suspects being Iran, the Islamic State, the Axis of Resistance, and groups like this.
Exactly.
Would you say today, Qatar at least, you can't speak for the whole GCC, today, September of 2025, after these incidents and where Israel's going, and taking into account everything that Iran and its different groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and things like this, what is seen as the more destabilizing force? Is it Israel or is it Iran from your perspective?
Can I throw that question back at you in a different manner?
Okay.
If you were considering attacks against your sovereignty,
Mm-hmm.
and one of these attacks, which was a military attack, by their air force, killed one of your security officers,
Mm-hmm.
attacked a neighborhood where 5,000 people lived, 6 schools, 13 embassies, and 5,000 of your people.
Yeah.
At a time when people were getting back home from work, when you, for the first time in your history, have a fallen soldier, the ISF Corporal Badr al-Dosi was 22 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and he is buried while all Qataris watch the funeral.
Right.
Would you compare that to any kind of threat around the world if this has never happened before?
First time for you guys.
First time in the country, where we have a fallen countryman who fell because of the political decision of an individual who decided to attack militarily Qatar. This happens anywhere else around the world. This is the declaration of war.
Yeah.
The whole world would go crazy
Yeah.
if a state in another mediation, let's say, we're holding talks between Russia and Ukraine. We're holding talks between DRC and Rwanda at the same time. Let's say the Russians decided or the Ukrainians decided to assassinate the team on the other side of the table at the time when they were negotiating and reading the proposals submitted by the United States. What would happen to the threat perception as a result of that in the world? What would happen to the international community? How would the international community react to that?
Right. Yeah.
Qatar was attacked while mediating a day after we handed over the proposal of President Trump to the political office of Hamas and asked them, as a proxy for the United States in this, to discuss that proposal in a meeting. That meeting, which was public knowledge, was targeted by F-35s of Israel without consulting the United States.
And that's the case. That from your perspective, they were caught unawares, the Trump administration.
Exactly. So the question is, what does that say about the state of world affairs today? How is that going to change threat perception for us and threat perception even for the United States or the region as a whole?
Yeah. Let's go back to US-Qatar relations. I'll get into Palestine and Israel in a second. So Trump made that statement in May. These actions take place. When he came back, and there's some controversy, I'm going to ask you about this, and probably sensitive, but your country gifted to President Trump a plane. And a few weeks after he came back, Senator Chris Murphy, and I don't know if you've noticed in America, a lot of things get really political on a lot of issues. Senator Murphy introduced a resolution to try to cut off arms sales to your country. And again, this was weeks before you got attacked twice. How do you sense the debate about not just Qatar, but the Middle East in the United States today? How do you see it? Do you see it suffering from these partisan divisions? Are we clear-headed? How do you see it from the Doha perspective?
Well, we've learned something in the GCC, which is it's not good for us to get into the political polarization of other countries in the West.
So you're not a blue state, you're not a red state.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we need to make it very clear that we will not play into these kind of polarizing discussions. We work with the administration in place.
Yeah.
We work with the institutions. And we hope that this polarization doesn't come back and become a problem for all of us in the region. The reality of the situation, of course, is polarization is problematic for all involved.
Right.
Including your international interlocutors.
Yeah.
For us in Qatar, when it came to working with the Trump administration, we worked with the Trump administration very closely in Trump 1. Towards the end of the administration, we brokered the Taliban-US agreement, which meant, the end of the 20-year war in Afghanistan, and we've helped evacuate under the Biden administration about 120,000 people out of Afghanistan with the help of the United States, for the United States, and working with them in that evacuation. And when Trump 2 was just in even transition, we brokered the ceasefire with the help of Witkoff and President Trump at the time. So we've been working very closely with this administration. The only problem here is that we have to keep reiterating that because we work very closely with any administration, that doesn't mean that we are doing anything nefarious. This is the administration in place. We are working very closely with them. So let's take the plane issue.
Yeah. But my recollection, first we get to the plane, under the Biden-Blinken team, they leaned on you quite a lot, not only on Afghanistan, but then after October 7th.
Of course.
And it's not a partisan issue, but then sometimes people make it between sort of election years. But on the plane issue, how do you respond to these concerns that come from senators and others? Because there is a real concern, and I think his concern was, well, there's business dealings between the Trump family and Witkoff family and your country and the sovereign wealth funds and things like this. And how do you address all of that?
Well, first of all, let me make it very clear. Qatar is not responsible for the legal framework of other countries. We're responsible for the legal framework in our country. Right? The legal framework in our country, when we entered into the discussions over the plane, this was a military-to-military discussion. It was not, a diplomatic discussion, for example, between ministries of foreign affairs. This was a discussion between our military that owns the plane, because our military, just like the US military, is responsible for the Emiri fleet. And this was a plane sitting there, not being utilized by Qatar. And you might imagine that such a big plane that's for personal use doesn't have a lot of clientele around the world if you want to sell it. And there was an agreement that Qatar would provide the plane for use as Air Force One. And that this would entail a legal agreement. The legal discussions are still in place. They're not finished.
So it's ongoing, and it's
ongoing. And the reason it's ongoing is because our lawyers and the US lawyers are working together to make it a legal one. And to make sure that it is a legal one. We're not doing this because we want to buy off the US administration. And I can tell you very clearly that if $400 million can get you the US, well, that's certainly a cheap price, even cheaper than Alaska, if you think about it.
It's interesting.
So I'd say very clearly that this is a military-to-military agreement. It's still in the works legally. But of course, everything that happens in the US right now is part of this media frenzy that is part of the general polarization that's taking place here.
Let's delve deeper into Palestine. And before we get to October 7th and your mediation role, let's just hit the rewind button and remind people, because sometimes we forget the basics. How is it that Hamas, which in the United States is a terrorist organization, foreign terrorist organization, how did they come to sort of get a office and a headquarters? Was it just something you wanted to do? Did someone ask you to do it? Just remind us there.
Let's go even a little bit further and ask, where was Hamas situated before they came to Qatar? Hamas had their political office in Jordan for a really long time. They had their political office in Syria for a really long time under the Assad regime. And they moved to Qatar 2 times. Once in coordination with our regional partners when they needed to leave Jordan. They were taken to Qatar for a while.
What year was that?
I'm not sure of the year, but it was in the beginning of the 2000s. At the time, there was a big issue between Hamas and the Jordanians. And then they moved to Syria, and they stayed there as a political officer for a really long time. But starting 2006, there was an election in the Palestinian territories. In that election, Fatah lost the election. Hamas won the election. It was the first ever election where Hamas stood. And at the time, the view from our part of the world was this was a Sinn Féin moment, where you have a militant group that's been a very nationalistic militant group with Islamic tendencies, basically moving towards being a political group. When Hamas won the elections, instead of engaging and moderating the group and working with them, the international community decided to boycott the whole PA. And as a result, we were asked by the United States, at the time Condoleezza Rice under President Bush, to start the job of mediating between Hamas and Israel, because basically...
So it was in the Bush administration?
It was in the Bush administration.
Yeah, good.
And they told us basically, well, we will not be engaging with Hamas because of our position towards them.
Right.
So we want you to talk to them on our behalf.
Okay.
When the Syrian revolution started, Hamas took a pro-revolution position against the Assad regime.
So then 2012...
Assad basically massacred the Yarmouk camp where most of the Hamas members and people were. And they were left with a decision to take, which is where to go.
Yeah.
The view, in coordination with the United States and others in the region, was, well, they can go to Iran or somewhere else, or they can be in Doha. Remember, this is just before the time when the Taliban political office was also hosted in Doha.
So this is in the Obama administration. So it was Bush administration first time, second time Democratic Obama administration.
With the Obama administration. And starting with that moment, when the political office was moved to Doha, which, as I said, it was in Jordan, then Syria, then Doha, the mediations began to work on a lot of stabilizing tactics. And we've always said, the situation in Gaza is not sustainable.
Right, yeah.
This is 2.3 million people living in complete isolation. They are besieged. They have weapons.
Yeah.
And this will never be sustainable. But the agreement we were working on at the time with the US and with the Israelis and the international community was the only thing we can do right now is stabilize the situation.
Yeah.
Freeze the conflict until we have a peace process that would bring all of this into the peace process kind of format. And instead of that happening, what we had was always pushing for the maintaining of this
status quo as it was, and the divisions between Ramallah and Fatah and Hamas.
And we actually mediated between Fatah and Hamas, by the way.
Yeah. And we're not going to be able to go through the whole history of all of this with the time that we have, but it is fascinating, and I wish we had more extended time to do that. But the other thing before we get to October 7th, just to remind everybody, just the basic facts. And I remember going to Doha and meeting with, I think it was Dr. El-Imadi and people who were working on on Gaza, from Qatari aid and support to the people of Gaza and Palestinian people. How did those arrangements come to be in terms of the split between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and in Gaza? Who were the people that actually, did you volunteer yourself and say, we should play this role, or did someone come to you and with a request?
No, so Israel was faced with a problem after the unilateral pullout of Gaza.
In 2005, yeah.
In 2005, which is what happens to this region. It is, in international law, it's still occupied because it's besieged by the Israelis. It's not an independent entity. It doesn't belong to any other entity. It's still part of the occupation of Israel. But Israel doesn't want to pay for it. Doesn't want to provide security. Doesn't want to do anything with it. So what happens to the people inside? If you're not allowing things to come further, if you're not allowing people in Gaza to trade normally with the region, then what happens? Then you need somebody to subsidize the stability and security in Gaza through providing aid and development. So we wanted to do that, but through a very clear agreement with the Israelis. So around $4 billion in aid that came in between 2012 and 7th of October. All of that aid, you can break it down into two major tracks. One was the infrastructure projects, building hospitals, building schools, building roads, and so on. These projects were done in complete coordination with Israel. Every material that goes in through Israel, not through Egypt, by the way.
Right.
And they were bought in Israel from Israeli companies. Money was transferred to Israel. And the Israeli government had complete oversight with the help of the UN agencies that were working, including UNRWA and UNODC and others who were working with us at the time and still working with us very, very closely. So there was a very clear trail.
And it was with their security establishment. It was everywhere.
Everything was vetted.
And the political leadership.
Everything was vetted. And this was through all the prime ministers you can think about, not only Netanyahu, but even during Bennett and Lapid times, and even before that.
And it continued up until October 7th? When was the last request?
It continued until 7th of October. I'll tell you one thing. The other track was the support for the poorest families in Gaza, which is $100 support for every family. that list of people who were getting that support was vetted by the Israelis. So
Yeah.
nobody on that list can be given $100 unless the Israelis, give an okay on that. We go into Gaza with the UN. We review the list. We have a biometric check of every individual that comes in to receive that money. We have distribution points all around Gaza. Money is distributed. We go back with receipts to the Israelis.
Yeah.
It's vetted by the UN. Everything happens, above board. But the narrative here is problematic because the Israelis want to say that money was used by Hamas, right? Well, they were part of the distribution process along with the UN. So if there is an accusation here, the accusation goes to the three parties that were involved in the distribution of these funds.
Well, clearly mistakes were made, though, because or something happened that went wrong, right? I was shocked. I used to live in Gaza for about 2-3 years and worked there in the 90s. And to see the tunnels, to see sort of the armaments that were present there, was this a shock for you guys too, or no?
I mean, of course, we always knew that there was a big militant, group in Gaza.
Yeah.
We've seen the rockets, flying, and it's very clear that they had help from outside Gaza.
Yeah.
But we are quite confident in the process we had because we were very sure that the process had a very clear line where the money starts and ends, who receives every dollar. And none of the money we've sent over was sent in bags or smuggled into Gaza. Everything went through Israel. Even the money was actually deposited and withdrawn from Israeli banks.
Yeah.
The other problem here is that within the aid modality, we've always said it was not sustainable, and we've stopped aid once.
Yeah.
We got an official request by the Israelis to provide aid again and continue doing aid. And we got another request, and these are written requests, by the way, to increase the aid going into us. So throughout the consecutive governments in Israel, aid to Gaza was not seen as a threat. It was seen as an opportunity. It is the way it maintained status quo.
It was a key tool of this. So then when you look, I mentioned this earlier to you before we were talking, when you look at statements, there's a conference this week in Israel, and a former Mossad chief, Udi Levy, essentially pointed the finger at your country. And this is somebody who was presumably part of that system at some point and said that not only were you financing this, you were in on the plot on October 7th. And this is, again, after the statement was made this week, after the strike in September 9th. I don't know if you know this guy or you saw the statement and things like this, but it's what you've heard before. How do you respond to that? That basically you were part of the plot to attack us, and what you're saying is something completely different. You're saying, no, we were part of a plan to try to help the people of Gaza, and we wanted to actually have a bigger plan, and want to get to that in a second of where you see all of this going. So how do you respond to these accusations?
Well, first of all, I mean, let's deconstruct all of these claims, right? The first and main claim is that Qatar is harboring Hamas.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Hamas was there in total agreement with the United States and Israel throughout the years. Israel has used that channel countless times since 2006 and today.
Yeah.
And they've never objected to that channel being there. When it comes to the aid going into Gaza, I just explained how that happened under the watch of the Israelis. But the problem right now is that people in the Israeli government, and Netanyahu personally, needs a scapegoat, needs a way of explaining the train of failures that culminated in the 7th of October. That is basically a result of his policies of isolating Gaza, his policies of separating the Palestinians and what he thought that was dividing and conquering, his policies of maintaining a status quo in the region that cannot be maintained.
Yeah.
And therefore, the easiest thing when it comes from a narrative point of view is to point to a foreign power that can be just blamed for everything at the same time. But the question here is, why did all of these consecutive governments in Israel use the Qatari channel, use Qatari aid, work with the Qataris so closely throughout the years, if they knew anything about it? And if they knew nothing about it, how can they explain to their people that they were duped for so many years by a power that was supporting Hamas? Why haven't they said at one point, Qatar, you shouldn't have the Hamas here, Hamas leadership there, and the US, please go and talk to Qatar about it?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, time is running short here. So much we can discuss. Here we are in September 2025. Israel has launched a military campaign in Gaza City. Want to take this discussion and your mediation sort of role. You're still willing to play that role despite all of it all between Hamas and Israel, or you're waiting to see?
I mean, first of all, the viability of the talks are what is in question right now.
Whether you could even have a conversation.
How can you have a conversation when you ask one party to discuss the proposal presented by the United States on behalf of the other party, and that party waits for that meeting and then bombs the delegation? How can you ask the other party to meet again to discuss your delegation? You basically you've corrupted the model when it comes to mediation. Right. So we are questioning the viability of any talks taking place right now. We are committed to end the war in Gaza. Any way possible. We are committed to end the suffering in the region. We are committed to de-escalate and to rein back this reign of terror in the region that's going on now for about 2 years. And we are committed to hold Netanyahu accountable for not respecting the sovereignty of any of the states around him, but also targeting Qatar in this way. At a time when Qatar was able to bring back 148 hostages, including 119 Israelis, through its mediation, and he failed to bring any hostages home through his own military campaign that has, taken the lives of more than 60,000 Palestinians and hasn't achieved anything for Israeli security.
Yeah, I was going to bring the hostages up too. That's one of your goals, is to get them home safely, yes?
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, with 148 hostages going back home, we have to ask, who brought the hostages home? Was it Netanyahu's military campaign? Was it the IDF going in and bringing them back? It was the mediation. It was the negotiation table. It was bringing them back. And this has happened throughout the world. Today we have 2 British nationals going back home from Afghanistan as a result of Qatari mediation. With Venezuela, we did the same. With Iran before, we did the same. This is a negotiation process. And you don't negotiate between friends, by the way. You're going to negotiate between enemies.
What do you say to those in Israel? And I've heard this from some who say, well, Qatar could just tell them what to do. That Hamas, because, they're housing them and they have given support and financial support and things like this. How do you respond to those who say that?
No, it's very easy. Look at when we decided to suspend our mediation role. They left the country. They went to another place, and they continued talking to the parties. We couldn't do anything about it. We don't have any leverage over Hamas. The only leverage we have with Hamas is the trust that was built through the mediation process.
Last question on this file. What's the longer term prospect? What do you think is the most sustainable outcome of all, not just the war, but where does this need to land? Are you part of this campaign that you see at the UN, that Saudi Arabia, France, and others, to recognize a 2-state solution? Can you see yourself formally recognizing also Israel and normalizing ties in the future in your lifetime? What's your sense of the bigger vision?
Brian, right now, the biggest threat to international peace and security is what's happening in Gaza and the fallout of what's happening in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu has decided to take Israel into being a rogue and pariah state in the region. He doesn't care about the United States. He doesn't care about the regional security architecture, and he has changed the face of the regional security architecture by the attack on my country. Again, Qataris are not used to the residential neighborhoods being bombed in this way. My daughter was in university at the time, and I was just getting home, and the place where the bombing happened is a residential neighborhood right in smack in the middle between the university and my home. And I had to think, for the first time in my life, for the safety of my daughter as I'm trying to get her home from university. This will leave an impact on not only the psychological but also the political considerations in the region for a really long time. So we are at a different point. The region before the 9th of September is different than the region after the 9th of September.
Yeah, I see it too. God.
There are terrible, catastrophes that took place between 7th of October and now, right? Obviously, what happened in Qatar is not the worst when it comes to a humanitarian level, but when it comes to a regional security level, it's a game changer. And we need collectively in the region to sit together and start thinking about it. The statement that came out of the GCC, the Defense Council that met yesterday, these are things that wouldn't have happened before the 9th of September.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking here about a position in the Gulf and in the region as a whole, that we have an unhinged leader in Israel that has basically reshaped, as he likes to say, the Middle East into this chaotic model of his dreams, and will continue doing so unless we work together collectively with the international community, with our partners in the region, with the United States, with the United Nations, to make sure that he is held accountable and that Israel respects the sovereignty of its neighbors, and we have security assurances in our neighbors and our neighborhood that would make it very clear that an attack by Israel is not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And it's deterred.
So bottom line, though, it's hard for you to discuss that longer term vision while you see an immediate present challenge and threat coming from the unpredictability.
We can't do it with a gunslinger in the region basically just shooting everywhere.
Yeah. But if we get past this moment, if somehow Netanyahu changes tack and has a different approach and offers assurances, or if there's a different leader, what's your ideal vision for what it looks like for Israel and Palestine?
The New York statement that came out of the two-state solution conference was a very important document, because for the first time you had language agreed upon between Latin American countries, African countries, Asian countries, Europe and the Arab world over what to do with the Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
You had a very clear plan on how the world is going to help the Palestinians get out of this and help ensure Israeli security. That is signed off by almost all the European countries and the Arab and Islamic countries and Latin Americans and Africans, with only one holdout, which is Israel. That is not party to that discussion.
And the U.S. is on the side.
And obviously the U.S.
Yeah.
That is a plan that will work if it was given a chance to work. That is a plan that is realistic. It offers security assurances to Israel, and it offers a life and a hope for the Palestinians that has never existed.
And despite all of this, you're willing to offer those security assurances and to put more money and resources into rebuilding Gaza and a pathway to a two-state. That's your position, essentially?
It will take more than a bully like Netanyahu to drag us away from peace. I mean, the region cannot afford the Palestinians losing hope.
Great.
Right.
So very last question. We've run out of time. I like to do this with all of my guests, and closing off on the policy discussion and turn into you. What's your origin story? How'd you get into this? I know you're an academic. I actually started to read your thesis. You got a PhD. You've worked you wrote columns. You've worked in think tanks and things like this. What was the spark? What motivated you to do what you do?
Well, I was always interested in politics in a way that probably was quite different to my peers when I was in school. And I was part of the first ever scholarship program to study politics abroad. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a politics or an international relations department in Qatar.
Wow.
As a whole.
What year was this?
This was in 99, 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. So the moment I saw that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was offering scholarships through the Ministry of Education at the time to go and study politics, I remember they gave you this piece of paper where you just put in your three choices for a major, and they would just choose one for you of the three with the priority list in mind.
Yeah.
And I put politics, psychology, and then I thought, what the hell am I going to put as the third option? Management. Right. I'm very glad that they didn't get to that at the end.
Yeah.
So I went to the U.S. first of all to study politics in Oregon.
Oregon?
Yes. And
University of Oregon or someplace else?
University of Oregon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then I had to leave after September 11th. The situation was very difficult for Arab and Muslim students at the time. And I decided to move to the UK, where I continued my studies in Leeds.
Okay.
By the time I got back, I felt like government was not the place for me to advance myself.
Yeah.
So within a year of working as a very junior employee in the office of HBJ at the time, he was the deputy prime minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Because he went along to be prime minister.
Yeah.
And I just left within a year, to the surprise of my family and my friends, and started working for civil society for a couple of years, and then moved to the university, where I continued my PhD, a master's and PhD, and was working for a survey research institute. And this is where my kind of quantitative hat started becoming part of how I see the world.
Right.
We're working on public opinion, and one of the last jobs I did in the university was heading the policy department at the center.
Oh, great.
And I was trying to translate academia into policy, and I was convinced that I was succeeding in that. Of course, when I got into government, I realized that it was gibberish to people working in government. And then, when the rift happened in the Gulf.
In 2017.
Exactly. Yeah. My role as a columnist exploded into becoming a political commentator and pundit.
Yeah.
And this is where I think people started taking notice of this young academic who was able to speak both languages, Arabic and English, in a decent way, and would be useful in countering a lot of the accusations against Qatar.
Yeah.
And then I headed the Security Academy, of course, where I took 2 years developing the curriculums and the programs with the academy. And this is when the Prime Minister called me in, now the Prime Minister, of course, at the time, again, Deputy Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdurrahman, and said, Majed, I want you to be the spokesperson after Lulwa.
Right.
Because she was being upgraded to become Assistant Minister.
Right.
And, we also have had the pleasure of His Highness. So, of course, didn't have the option to say anything else.
So what would you say after telling us your trajectory there? If there's a young man, young woman out in Doha, somewhere in Qatar, who wants to follow in your footsteps, what should they do?
Well, first of all, they shouldn't follow in my footsteps. Be careful of being very impulsive and leaving your job at a whim. But I would say two things. One is when you study social sciences as a whole, but especially political science and international relations, you tend to be very idealistic.
Yeah.
By the time you get into the reality of the world, you tend to be very pessimistic.
Right.
Keep some of that idealism in your back pocket.
Idealism.
Don't lose it. Because if you lose it, you lose prospect of what you're doing. You become a tool in a big process that produces nothing. Unless you have some of that idealism in the back of your mind that's driving what you're doing, some belief, not only in the systems and the processes, but belief in the ideals that you are trying to work with. If I didn't believe personally in peace, if I didn't believe in my country, if I didn't believe in the need to go beyond yourself and do something that might be not at your own interest, but for the interest of those who need you to work for them, you wouldn't be able to be a force for good in the world.
Think of something bigger than yourself and connect your talents and your interests to that. So, Dr. Majed, thanks for spending so much time with us. We didn't cover it all. We didn't cover Iran and other topics, but we could talk forever, maybe another episode next time you're in town. But appreciate your time and being with us this week.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Great. That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in and to our colleagues for their work on this week's episode. You can follow MEI on X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and subscribe to our email newsletters for our latest analysis and information about upcoming events. I'm Brian Katulis. We'll see you all soon.